I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Ben Feldman, who plays Jonah on NBC's beloved workplace comedy Superstore. First of all, Ben, it's been a few months since Superstore finally finished up on screen, and many of us are still missing it. But we did get a really beautiful series finale where I thought it was really immensely satisfying and a really nice way to kind of give all these people that we've kind of been with for 6 years a nice hug, and then we know they're going to be okay. What did you think of the series finale?
Well, I mean, I agree, but it's almost, I don't know, I feel like it's almost narcissistic for me to say that, because I was one of the people that fought really hard for it to be exactly as it was. And all of those things, America and I, the producers, the writers, worked really, really hard on that finale, and it's especially the writers, of course. But just putting in a huge amount of thought and time and care into these characters and making sure that we were getting it right, and sending them off the right way. We've always been a show that's sort of been a little bit subversive in that we've never really cared too much to tell the story you want. We want to tell the story we want, and we like to trick you into thinking you're getting what you want, and then taking it away from you. And I thought, what better a time to throw that rule out the window and just sort of make sure that everybody lands their respective planes in the least bumpy, most satisfying way. And so that's what we did with the finale.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised because what you said is exactly what I was expecting. This show never really quite goes where you think it's going to go. It is subversive. It's a little bit kind of off the wall and left field. And yet I was really impressed that you guys were like, no, we're just going to give the audience something really nice, because we've all been through hell over the last.
We've been through hell. It's been too much, and we shot through hell. By the way, we shot the during the pandemic, and so yeah, everybody needed it. In my opinion, that finale was almost like an emotional Xanax for the fans and for us. It was a giant glass of wine. It was a sad hug goodbye, but it was bittersweet, and it was hopefully more sweet than anything else. You know, I've been on shows where they say, we know what they want, screw them, they're not getting it, we're doing it this way instead, and we've succeeded if they walk away disappointed and angry, and that's just not where we were with this show.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the pandemic, so obviously this show was one of the first to really address it properly on screen, as well as dealing with it behind the scenes, with all of the precautions. Obviously, working in a retail store, you guys didn't really have much of a choice. You could have just pretended like it didn't exist, but that wouldn't have felt true. So talk us through what was probably the most difficult aspect of getting that right on screen. Was it the masks, or was it something else? What was
it? Was, I mean, it probably the masks, just because it's the, you know, if COVID, there were a lot of talks early on before we went into the season. I think all of the people that counted were in agreement that this show, we needed to show these people going through these things that we are all going through. If you want to escape, if you want to watch dragons or cops without masks on or whatever, there's a million other shows you can do that. What essentially happened was, we've been playing these, you know, these blue collar, these like grocery store workers that were like silly and goofy, and we've all been there at some point and whatever for a long time. And then COVID happened, and all of us actors and writers and producers and everybody, we ran home to our basements and ordered Chinese food for a year and a half and hid from the world. And these people that were playing on TV were actual, literal, genuine heroes who were risking their lives to go out and do the things we were pretending to do for 5 seasons. And so we owed it to them and to the people that identify with them and the people in similar, you know, frontline situations, to tell the story and to get it right and to show their lives in a way where you can sort of say, hey, look, this is you, we're showing you, we are you, but also it's kind of funny if you step back for a second and look at it. There's a lot of different ways that television can be an escape. It can be a total escape, a fantasy escape. It could be super cathartic and emotional and just really digging into all of the awful injustices or whatever. And then there's sort of our brand, which is like, which is like a funny mirror, kind of, like if let's all just laugh at what we're all going through right now. And I think that's sort of the Superstore brand. So anyway, that all
Yeah.
said, we talked about it for a really long time. When we decided, then it was like, should we do a version where COVID exists but masks don't? Because it's impossible to really produce and act and tell a story for the viewers to see masks the entire time, for the sound people, just for literally everybody. And so we really were diligent about making a plan. We had a mask plan every single episode. The week before, we would get an email that would go through every single scene, and it would say, in this scene, it's after hours, and so they've taken their masks off, and we just sort of assume that they're okay with doing that. Maybe they're a little irresponsible, but that's kind of true to a lot of these places, and it's a way to get away with it. Or in this scene, they're eating, they're in the cafe, or in this scene, work is happening, but this section of the store is closed off, and we'll show in an establishing shot that there's a gate or a tape that separates us. So we really, really worked hard to get that right. But ultimately, everybody has an opinion. And there's always going to be people that were like, well, why didn't they have their masks on there? And blah, blah, blah. And it's like, at the end of the day, we're a television show. We're doing everything we can, guys. We showed up. We're showing up in the middle of this pandemic to make this TV show. And we're doing everything we can.
Yeah, let's just be great. And like, it's not a documentary, and thankfully there wasn't a lot of pushback from the political side, where masks, putting a cloth on your face, became a massive issue for some reason.
And we actually there was even characters that came in and were sort of annoyed by it. I mean, we tried to tell all of those stories, but I think our mantra has always been, talk about what's happening if you can find a funny way to do it. And so if we did, we did it.
Yeah, I like that. So, I mean, you've touched on this a bit already, but being a producer on the show is an added element to what you're already doing as being one of the main characters. What is probably the most exciting part of that aspect of your role on the show?
Getting sort of a backstage pass, getting a seat at the table when the show is being created, being there in discussions about the characters and their arcs, specifically mine. America and I were very hands-on about our two characters, Emmy and Jonah, and having just a dialogue with the writers and the other producers about, well, what would the tone of this be? What would actually happen between them? How would they get back together? How would they break up? Just sort of kind of crafting something from the beginning was really, really exciting. And then also just kind of watching the dailies, watching the cuts, the different cuts, seeing how incredible this cast is, these actors are, how little work you have to do as a director or producer, really anybody on this show, because the actors and the writers are just so great. You could just sort of sit back and the show builds itself. So that was really cool. I mean, I'm spoiled. If I'm ever a producer or director on anything else again, I'm sure it'll be a harrowing experience, because I'll probably have to work. I'll have to lift a finger, which I didn't have to do on Superstore.
Yeah, what a dream! Oh, gosh.
Mm-hmm.
When it was announced that America was going to depart the show after the season premiere, were you initially at all apprehensive about how the show how that would impact the Amy Jonah storyline?
No, I mean, a long time ago when I signed on to do this show, I was clear, and so was Justin, who created it. We were all in agreement that this is the kind of show. This is an ensemble, and if one of us leaves, the show doesn't fall apart. It's not dominoes. That's what I wanted to be on. I had just come from a show that was not like that, and I very much wanted to be in an ensemble where, to a degree, my departure was irrelevant, which is ridiculous to now say out loud. But I truly feel that Superstore was that. I think America was a hugely incredible and necessary and important part of the show, and she brought such a great energy to it. But I also truly believed that if America left, the show would go on. And it, in my opinion, it did. I mean, I'll leave that to people whose job it is to critique us. But I think it was great with and without America. So I wasn't terribly worried. But for Amy and Jonah, yeah, I mean, look, Jonah dated other ladies. So I figured somebody would come in. And we were kind of setting up a future romance. But it was really, really great to have America come back. We were tremendously lucky to have her come back and sort of, to continue my plane metaphor, help us land the plane the best way possible.
Absolutely. It was it was really great to see her come back. But to be honest, after, like, from third episode onwards of season 6, I was genuinely so impressed with the way the cast really stepped up and delivered a very strong and memorable season. And because the Amy character is so central, even though it's an ensemble, she's a very popular character. But without no disrespect to America, but I really didn't really notice it after a while. And I really enjoyed having this different dynamic amongst all the characters. And I just wonder, like, what is probably the best thing about this particular ensemble? Because I've got the impression, and I don't think it's fake, I think it's quite genuine, that you're all quite close. We're close and probably will remain that way.
We are very close. We were texting just last night. The text chain lives on. I just saw them from my birthday. A bunch of them came over. The ones that didn't come to my birthday were out of town. Like, it's a great group of people. I think, first of all, they're all incredible actors. And I think we've all become better at what we do over the course of time. I think I'm a better actor because of them. I'm funnier because of them. And I'd like to think that it's vice versa. An interesting thing that you said about America was that, she was sort of this central, she was, to a degree, she was a voice of reason, and she was a little more grounded than some of the other characters on the show. And what's interesting was, in America's absence, there was a void that sort of created a void that needed to be filled. And I think what happened was this cast stepped up and took little pieces of the sincerity and the groundedness and the realism of America's performance on themselves. And what I think made season 6 such a special season was specifically that these characters, in a way, we all were forced to evolve because we were kind of picking up the pieces of the absence of someone of that sort of energy. So it forced everybody to become more well-rounded, better characters, and a little more emotional and more in touch with what was sort of happening in real life. And then on top of that, you have a major global disaster happening at the same time, which raised a lot of the stakes for all of these people as well. It was a really, really interesting, exciting season, I think, and I don't think it could ever be recreated if we were to have gone on or on any other show. I think that sort of middle part of the Venn diagram of just America going, people sort of taking on their different roles, and then the pandemic, you're just never going to get that sort of energy again on a season of television.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I agree. I think everyone stepped up in their own special way to kind of help ground the show because the stakes were higher. And the pandemic, it shined a light, as you said earlier, on these frontline workers. When the people were dying and people were suffering. But to be honest, no disrespect to those people, but my memories of the pandemic were going to the grocery store at midnight to try to find toilet paper, and then ordering a bunch of Uber Eats because I didn't want to leave the house. So, and those people, God bless them, right? They were amazing, and thank you for them.
Yeah, you think about how high your stakes were just getting water and toilet paper. It was, and to think that, you would stress all morning about it and all afternoon afterwards, or whenever you went, or in the middle of the night. But those people just were there all day long, eventually behind some plastic shields. But it's just insane to think that they lived in that high stress environment all day long, talking to strangers.
Talking to strangers and talking to lots of crazy people. And speaking of that Venn diagram, this season actually was really critically well received. I think it got about 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and Rotten Tomatoes, which kind of sets up the consensus for each season, calls it one of TV's greatest workplace comedies. So I mean, you guys didn't just leave the airways and no one cares. It was a show that people really, really responded to. And I'm just wondering, how does that feel personally? Do you feel vindicated? Do you feel proud of the way the critics have responded to the show?
All of the feelings. I mean, in the midst of all of this, NBC decided that was it for us. So for this to sort of happen at that time, at the same time, Netflix started carrying us in other English-speaking countries like yours. And then we were like one of the top shows on those Netflixes in the UK, etc. so that happening, and then the critical love. Yeah, it's a surreal thing. You feel a lot of emotions. You go, well, why aren't we still doing it? But you go, well, isn't this great that we went out this way? You say, thank God everybody sort of came around and got on board and felt the love that we feel for the show. But then you go, well, where were they 6 seasons ago?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of emotions, but ultimately it's only great. I mean, it's great to see, the New York Times wrote this gorgeous eulogy for us, and New York Magazine Vulture, which is something that I read all the time, wrote this beautiful love letter to Superstore as well, and there was a whole bunch of other ones, and it was a really nice. It was like it was like we got to go to our own funeral, which is a surreal. It's an interesting thing when a show is canceled and also loved at the same time. You're sitting in the audience watching your eulogy, so it's nice.
Yeah.
In a
And
morbid way.
in a morbid way, but I totally hear where you're coming from. So I think also the show is funny and it's kind of zany and crazy, and the characters on the show are larger than life. But to be completely honest, after I binged it all, as you said, it's showing on Netflix in countries outside of the States and Canada, I kind of realized what I love most about it was how it resonates about friendship and teamwork and the underdog, especially the underdog. We always seem to gravitate to them, but this show is full of them. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you agree that that's a really powerful thing. And that seems to be why a lot of people really was attracted to.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of overdogs on television.
Yeah.
Whether it's presidents or cops or superheroes or whatever. And I think mostly we as a people globally identify as the underdogs. And I think our show never consciously tried to cram any sort of ideology down anybody's throats, and certainly did not bend over backwards to be the diverse show, the representation show. But just by nature, organically, if you're going to tell this story, you're going to be representing large swaths of people that feel relatively underrepresented on television in general, and whether that's race or sexuality or economic stance, class, etc. We've got it all, and I think that's what people really connected to on this show. Is you don't see that a lot on TV, and you don't see it treated delicately, but also with humor. We're not sympathetic, we're not judging, we're just reflecting essentially and finding the silliest, dumbest way to do it. And I think it was truthful. I think people respond to truth and sort of organic representation, and that's what this show was. Absolutely. It says the one elitist white guy from the cast. I'm maybe the last person to talk to about it, but that's the thing that I'm most proud about the show is the stuff that arguably I maybe am not in.
Yeah, and that's okay, because I mean, because it's just true to life. We're two white guys talking about representation, but it is actually true. It's so nice to see on my screen what I see in my life. It's just what we want more of.
Yeah.
My final question's about Jonah specifically, because I got a light bulb moment in the finale when I realized, when I saw the pilot, he was this college graduate who had dropped out and who was struggling to what is this job? It's beneath him. By the end, he had done a full 180 and was like super comfortable in his skin and kind of telling Amy where things went. The complete opposite. I loved that little journey. It hadn't occurred to me until I saw that scene between them. So I wonder, what did you most love about Jonah's evolution over 6 seasons?
What you just said is a takeaway. America and I and the writers and other producers are really hopeful. A lot of people felt, because that evolution, that sort of crisscross, she was in one place and he was in another place, and they ended up in these other places, but they ended up there because of each other. It was the most important story to tell, because our show ultimately at the end of the day was not about class or economic levels or race or whatever it was. It was about community. It was about loving the people that you're with, and the family that you found yourself in, and how people grow amongst each other. Our show was about people, which was an interesting thing, especially to tell this last season when our entire last year and a half was about the absence of people, the absence of community. And so I think a really important special thing to us was to land on that, was to land on how do people grow together? How do people add to one another? Am I a piece of the person that I love? And vice versa. And I think that's what Amy and Jonah's journey was. You know, they got to a place because of each other and because of their impact on each other. And that's the case for everybody and every character on the show. And that's what I really thought was special about the show in the end. It was small. It wasn't about giant world topics and hot button, you know, this or that. It was about a community of people, a little family of people that eventually loved each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And all those little moments we weren't bashed over the head. It was just something that we were able to pick up on through the nuances of the great writing. Mm-hmm. Ben, congratulations on a really strong series, and especially this season. We really enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing more of you on our TVs.
Thank you. I look forward to being on your TVs more. Fingers crossed. It was great to talk to you.